My dad told me to shut up at dinner. Then an army doctor revealed the truth about me by Lisa Carter.
My dad told me to shut up at dinner. Then an army doctor revealed the truth about me. The fork hit the plate like a gunshot. Every head at the table snapped up. My little brother Marcus froze mid-chew. My mother's hand stopped halfway to the bread basket. Even the dog, a lazy old beagle named Biscuit who slept through thunderstorms, lifted his head from the kitchen floor. My father stood halfway out of his chair, face red, vein pulsing at his temple like a live wire. "Lisa Marie Carter," he said, each word dropping like a boot on concrete. "Shut your mouth." I was 13 years old. I had been talking about a news story. A soldier who had carried 3 wounded men out of an ambush on nothing but adrenaline and willpower, losing 2 fingers in the process and refusing a morphine shot until every one of his guys was loaded onto the helicopter. I thought he was the bravest person alive. My father thought I was being dramatic, again. "You don't know anything about the real world," he said, slowly lowering himself back into his chair, straightening his tie like the conversation had physically wrinkled it. "You never stop. You never think. You just talk and talk and talk, and you have absolutely no idea what any of it means." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I looked down at my plate. I picked up my fork. I ate my green beans one by one, each swallow feeling like I was pushing down something far larger than food. That night, I lay in the dark and made myself a promise. Someday, I thought, someone is going to tell me exactly what I am, and it is not going to be nothing. It would take 17 years, a military hospital, and a doctor with a silver star and ice-gold eyes before that promise came true. The girl nobody could figure out. I was not a bad kid. I want to be clear about that, not because I need you to like me, but because it matters for what comes later. I was not bad. I was loud. I was relentless. I was the kind of person who read 3 books at the same time and couldn't tell you what she had for breakfast, but could recite, word for word, a documentary about Navy SEAL training she had watched 6 months ago at 2 in the morning because she couldn't sleep. My teachers called it a discipline problem. My father called it disrespect. My mother, soft, quiet, endlessly patient, called it just Lisa being Lisa, which was the kindest way anyone had of saying they didn't understand me either. The only person who never seemed rattled by me was my grandmother, Nana Ruth. She was 71, sharp as a tack, and had been married to an army sergeant for 40 years before he died of a heart attack on a Tuesday morning in 1987. She kept his medals in a wooden box on her dresser and polished them every Sunday like a ritual. "You've got your grandfather's mind," she told me once, when I was 15 and had just gotten suspended for arguing with my history teacher about the tactical errors at the Battle of Fallujah, information I had absorbed from a documentary the school had not assigned. They didn't know what to do with him either. "What did they do?" I asked. She smiled slowly, the way old people smile when they know the ending of a story and you don't. "They put him in charge," she said. "Running. I enlisted at 21. Not because I was brave, not because I had a plan. I enlisted because I was standing in front of a recruiting office on a Wednesday afternoon in March, my car broken down 2 blocks away, my bank account sitting at $43, my college applications all returned with polite rejections, and a feeling in my chest like a spring wound so tight it was about to snap. And the recruiter opened the door, looked at me standing in the rain, and said, "You look like you're trying to decide something." I said, "I've been trying to decide for 21 years. He said, "Coming out of the rain." I signed the papers 9 days later. My father did not come to see me off. He sent a card. The card said good luck in his handwriting and nothing else. My mother cried into my shoulder at the bus station until the collar of my jacket was soaked through. Nana Ruth pressed the wooden box of medals into my hands and told me to bring them home with company. I kept that box in my footlocker for 3 years. The thing nobody prepared me for. Basic training was not the hard part. The hard part surprised me entirely, which I suppose is the nature of hard parts. I was good at the physical work. Better than good, I was exceptional in the ways that count when things go wrong. I didn't freeze. My brain, the same brain that could not sit still through a 40-minute class period, turned out to be extraordinarily well-suited to the specific chaos of high-stress decision-making. I saw the whole field. I connected things fast. I communicated under pressure with a clarity that my commanding officer described as almost unsettling. But I also cried in the bathroom twice a week. Not from exhaustion, not from homesickness, from something I could not name, a pressure behind my eyes and deep in my sternum, like I was absorbing everything happening around me and there was no release valve. Every soldier's grief landed on me like it was my own. Every close call lived in my body for days. I felt things at a volume that seemed several notches higher than what everyone else seemed to experience. And in the military, that kind of intensity is either your greatest asset or the thing that destroys you. I became very good at hiding it. Until I couldn't. Fort Carson, 2 a.m. November. I was 28 years old, stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, 7 months back from my second deployment, when everything came apart. It didn't happen dramatically. That's the thing about collapse, it rarely does. It looked like not sleeping, then not eating properly, then sitting in my parked car in the base parking lot for 45 minutes because I could not make myself open the door and go inside. My unit's medical officer flagged me during a routine check-in. He noted several things. He referred me. The referral landed me in the office of Dr. Colonel Raymond Holt. I want to describe Dr. Holt to you carefully because he matters. He was 54 years old, 2 inches shorter than me, with silver hair cut close and eyes that were the pale gray of winter sky. He had served as a military psychiatrist for 26 years. He had been deployed to 3 combat zones specifically to work with soldiers whose minds were struggling to process what their bodies had survived. He had a Silver Star for pulling a wounded soldier out of a collapsed building during an enemy offensive, not because it was his job, but because he was the only one standing close enough and he decided it needed to be done. He was not warm exactly. He was precise, like a scalpel, like a compass. Like someone who had learned that kindness delivered clearly, and without sentimentality, was more useful than kindness wrapped in softness. He shook my hand when I came in. He did not smile. "Sergeant Carter," he said, "sit down, tell me what's happening." And something in the way he said it, not soft, not clinical, just direct, just real, cracked me open like a fault line giving way after years of pressure. I talked for 45 minutes without stopping. He sat across from me with a notepad that he barely looked at, his gray eyes steady on my face, and he listened with the complete and total attention of someone who understood that what I was saying mattered, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. When I finally stopped, the room was so quiet I could hear the heating unit ticking in the corner. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You've been treating your brain like it's a malfunction. It isn't." The revelation. What followed was 3 weeks of the most thorough psychological and neurological assessment I had ever undergone. And I had been assessed before, by school counselors and pediatricians, and a therapist my mother sent me to briefly at 16, all of whom had looked at me and seen a problem to be managed. Dr. Holt did not manage, he examined. He brought in 2 additional specialists. He reviewed my full academic and military record. He administered tests that measured not just what I struggled with, but what I excelled at, and the excelling, it turned out, was considerable. He called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon in late November. The mountains were visible through his window, hard and white with early snow. He placed a thick report on the desk between us. My name was printed on the cover in clean black letters. "You have ADHD," he said without preamble. "Combined presentation, high masking, undiagnosed your entire life." I had suspected something like this. The words didn't shock me. But what came next did. "You also have something else," he said, leaning forward slightly, elbows on the desk, gray eyes absolutely level with mine. "Something that doesn't have a clean clinical name, but that I have seen in fewer than 30 people in 26 years of practice. You process emotional information the way a sonar system processes sound. Everything that happens around you, every person's fear, grief, tension, or courage, registers in your nervous system at full signal strength. You don't just notice it. You receive it. He paused. Most people with this trait spend their entire lives being told they are too much, too loud, too sensitive, too intense. Their families don't know what to do with them. Their schools don't know what to do with them. He looked at me steadily. Your father telling you to shut up at that dinner table was not a judgment on your worth. It was a man standing in front of a signal he didn't have the equipment to receive. That is his limitation. It was never yours. I sat very still. Outside the window, a hard wind moved through the pines at the edge of the base. Snow shifted off the branches in small, quiet falls. Something in my chest, something I had been pressing down since I was 13 years old, since the fork hit the plate and the whole table went silent, broke loose. I did not cry. I did something quieter and more complete than crying. I simply let it land, all of it. Every shut up and sit down and why can't you just be normal. Every report card folded into the trash. Every bathroom where I'd cried alone because I didn't have words for what was wrong with me. I let it land, and then I let it go. What do I do with this? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Dr. Holt almost smiled. Almost. You stop apologizing for the very thing that makes you exceptional, he said. And then you go do what you were built to do. What I was built to do. I spent the next 2 years working differently. Not harder, smarter. With the diagnosis came tools, strategies, medication that leveled the floor without dimming the lights. With Dr. Holt's guidance, I learned to work with my brain instead of dragging it like a reluctant animal. And something extraordinary happened. The skills that had made me difficult my entire life became the exact skills that made me indispensable. I could read a room of combat veterans, men and women so shut down they hadn't spoken honestly to anyone in months, and within an hour have them talking. Not because I was charming, because they could feel that I was receiving them, fully, without flinching. I could be in a briefing room when the pressure was stratospheric and find the one thread in the chaos that everyone else had missed. I could make decisions at speed without losing the human beings inside the situation. I was promoted twice in 18 months. My commanding officer wrote in my evaluation, Sergeant Carter demonstrates an exceptional ability to operate effectively in high complexity, high emotion environments. Recommend for leadership track. I read those words standing in the parking lot outside the admin building and laughed until my eyes watered, thinking about every teacher who had written, Lisa struggles to focus, and every room I had been told to quiet down in. I thought about Nana Ruth and her wooden box of medals. I thought, I'm bringing them home with company. The phone call. I called my father on a Sunday evening in April. I was 30 years old. The mountains were pink with sunset outside my window, and I had just made coffee, and I decided, the way I decide most important things, suddenly, completely, without overthinking it, that it was time. He answered on the second ring. I could hear the television in the background. News, of course. I told him everything. The diagnosis, Dr. Holt, the assessment, what had been true about me since before I could walk. I told him clearly and without cruelty the way Dr. Holt had taught me to deliver hard truths, not as weapons, but as information. My father was silent for a long time. So long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, in a voice I had never heard from him before, quieter, older, stripped of all its authority, I didn't know how to be your father, Lisa. I want you to know I've known that for a long time. I just didn't know how to say it. It was not an apology, not exactly, but it was the truest thing he had ever said to me, and truth, I have learned, is the only currency that actually pays the debt. I know, Dad, I said. I know. We talked for an hour. About nothing and everything. About a 13-year-old girl who thought a wounded soldier refusing morphine was the bravest thing she had ever heard. About a father who didn't have the equipment to receive what his daughter was transmitting. About all the years between that dinner table and this phone call, and what it costs to carry silence that long. Before we hung up, my father said, "Are you good, Lisa? Are you actually good?" I looked out at the mountains turning dark against the last of the light. "Yeah, Dad," I said, "I'm actually good." And for the first time in my life, it was completely true. What I know now. I am 31 years old. I am a sergeant first class in the United States Army. I work in a unit that supports combat veterans navigating mental health crises, and I am, by every measure my commanders have, extraordinarily good at my job. Every day I sit across from people who have been told, in one way or another, to shut up and eat their dinner, to stop feeling so much, to be less, to quiet down, to fit into a shape that was never made for them. And every day I look at them with the same gray-eyed steadiness that Dr. Holt once turned on me, and I say the words that changed everything. "You've been treating your brain like it's a malfunction. It isn't." The fork that hit the plate when I was 13 sounded like a gunshot. But gunshots, I have learned, are also how starting pistols sound. I have been running ever since, and I have never once looked back.